We're good morning, everybody. This is just kind of our first pre-call, I guess. We've got 84 participants already in the call. There were over 200 registered. We'll just give it a couple more minutes for the staff to admit those that are in the virtual lobby, and then we'll get started in just a couple minutes.
I'll just respond to something in the chat line. So Charmaine in BC, no, there hasn't been one yet. There is talk of it though.
There.
Well, partner, you ready to go?
Whenever you are. Sounds
Okay.
good.
Yeah, it's just coming up on 11:05 here in Winnipeg, and I think we'll get started. There are people continuing to come in, but we know that you all have other commitments, and it is the Friday before a long weekend, so we'll get underway. It's a great pleasure to be able to welcome you to what we believe is the 8th PHE Canada check-in. I'm Grant McManes. I'm joining you here from Winnipeg, Manitoba. I'm the coordinator of healthy living here in Riel School Division and the current Manitoba Nunavut board rep to PHE Canada. Joining me today, co-hosting with me today, is a good friend and colleague from Saskatchewan, Mr. Leidl. Good morning, Reg.
Good morning. And I'd like to welcome, well, go ahead, Grant.
No, all yours.
Yeah. No, and I'd like to welcome everyone. Thank you for taking time to come out this morning. It's awesome. So I'd like to start out with, we'd like to start the meeting by recognizing the land that we are all situated on across our beautiful country. We are hosting today's meeting on both Treaty 1 and Treaty 4 territories. Whether you are gathering with us today in the same territory or from a different location, let us all take this opportunity to recognize and be grateful for the many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. Let us also give thanks to the elders and knowledge keepers, those with us today and those who are no longer with us, for their stewardship and teachings. And may we all continue to walk together towards reconciliation. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Great way to start this day. And again, welcome to everyone from coast to coast to coast. It's great to have you with us, and we're looking forward to an involved, interactive, and perhaps spirited conversation, as sometimes it can get when we start talking about assessment in any subject area, let alone in this COVID-19 environment that we're in now. We're sure that most of you, or the majority of you, have all been taking part in some sort of online meeting, but just to make sure that we're all on the same page regarding kind of formats, etc. Reg and I just want to, make sure that everyone understands this is, this is a check-in call. It's not a webinar. So while we will provide maybe some prompting questions, we really are looking forward to hearing from you as to what your thoughts are, situations are with regarding some of the prompting questions. our topic today is on assessment, but we're still fairly nimble, Reg and I, to be able to kind of navigate the conversation and allow you to, share a question, whatever happens to be, pertinent for you at this point in this situation. We have on the back end, and again, thanks to PHE Canada for hosting this. We've got Faye and Ellen on the back end that are trying to keep a track of the chat feature that some of you are already engaged in, so that's awesome. If you have a question or would like to provide some commentary, it's two ways you can do that. You can either, say I have a question or a comment and put it right in the chat feature. Or if you're familiar with Zoom, if you click on the hover over the participants area, you will see that there is the raise hand feature, and they will keep track, and they will not bother Reg or I if they just interrupt and say we've got a question from somebody. So that's how we see the day moving forward for the next 55 plus minutes, and allow you folks the time to ask questions that you need to get answered. We may not have the answers today, but we can certainly work towards getting feedback for you. And we also want to allow time at the end just to talk a little bit about what some moving ahead thoughts might be in terms of next year, in terms of format, and particularly around assessment. So having said that, we're going to jump into it. Like I said, the discussion is on assessment, and certainly is a bit tricky as education is a provincial jurisdiction, as we know. Reg and I have chatted a couple times this week, and just wanted to kind of start with the following, and then have you folks enter into the discussion. In K-8, focus has been identified from what we have kind of put together. The focus has been on literacy numeracy, with other subject areas like physical and health education teachers providing learning opportunities that, in the language of my assistant Soup, provide fun and enjoyment to the daily routines of our students at home, and that contribute to their overall well-being. Students will proceed to the next grade with the understanding they may be required to engage in recovery learning. At the high school level, certainly students will at minimum receive the grade they received at time of when classes were suspended, and are expected to remain engaged in their learning. Students will be provided with opportunities to improve their standing in their course. So I guess maybe a pretty wide open question, and certainly look forward to responses. What's your experience in the students engaging that you are working with? And if you wouldn't mind, if you are going to open up your mic, if you just share who you are, where you're from, just so that we have a little bit of context. So again, what's your experience in your students engaging with you, whether it's email, text, recordings, or live meetings? Certainly love to hear from you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's Gail Laurie, and I teach at Ben Wellingham School in Winnipeg, Manitoba. It's a K-8 school, and we have two different platforms. We're using Seesaw for our K-3, and we're using Edsby for our 4 to 8. And I'm finding the engagement to be pretty good. Like, I get a lot of videos, I get a lot of questions. I send out lessons Monday, Wednesday for my K-3s. And I get lots of videos back. I get lots of I miss yous, a lot of texting. And then with my 5 to 8s, I send out lessons on Tuesday, Thursday. We have less things required from them, but I just had an assignment due, and so far I got about half of it back.
Okay.
So
Thanks.
that's pretty good.
Nice to hear from you.
Thanks.
See Tina in the chat, maybe a third of the class consistently participating, some, not all, and it may, that third could change, I think, be a fairly fluid. It may not be the same third all the time. I see Brooke is saying when we've been using Zoom, email, Google Classroom, Facebook groups, etc. Good participation for most, and that's from BC. Thanks, Brooke. What have you been hearing from your folks in Saskatchewan, Reg?
The trend seems to be that the longer supplemental learning is going on, maybe the less engagement that's starting to happen, and that could be tied to the warm weather or the changes where people are heading outside. So there is a definite change, in the season and activities that people are doing. So I'm going to say a little less engagement. I also think there's a little bit. I think the novelty of supplemental learning, and teaching from home, is definitely. I think it's set in now that this is a little longer term than maybe a lot of people thought initially. So it is changing a little bit, right? Like the novelty's not there anymore, and there's certainly challenges. I'd also add too that maybe what I'm seeing maybe more as an executive director here in Saskatchewan is just the amount of stress that teachers are feeling. Some of it's with unknown, some of it's with their own personal situations, especially those from home that are teaching and their children are at home as well. So just there's lots of variables that are in play for teachers and for families. And I think the longer it goes, I know some provinces still haven't decided if it's going to go till the end of June. So whether the kids will be out till the end of June. So I think not knowing some things is a factor. And then also too, people are starting to look towards next fall. What's next fall going to look like?
Yeah, I would agree. Probably, I'm going to use the term kind of the honeymoon period, probably higher engagement when we, the first couple of weeks, and then as it starts to drain on, and, knowing that, students knowing that they will be moving on to the next grade, regardless of the level of engagement. I think it's, as warmer weather starts to arrive, it will be more difficult to keep them engaged. I'm going to invite. I did see his mic light up, and one of our teachers here in our division. So Cyril, if you're able, I know you were going to share something. So I'll turn it over to you, Cyril.
Oh yeah, hi everyone. Cyril Lindholm here from Winnipeg in the Riel School Division. Yeah, I was, and Reg, you kind of echoed a lot of the things that I was about to say here. It's been a little bit all over the place. So yeah, I have some. So yes, what I'll do is I'll have virtual classes Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays for about 30 minutes. And I'll also have per day for each class. And I'll also have little assignments that we can do through Microsoft Teams. There's stuff on YouTube, stuff on Twitter. So just like a lot of different avenues for people to connect, whichever way that they feel they're comfortable in doing so. So it's all over. So I'll have some students that connect with the virtual classes, and that's where I'll see them there. Some prefer to do the YouTube videos. Some will still hand in assignments through Teams. But my approach has kind of been like, I'm going to be here, and I'm going to be here as much as you guys need me, because I do understand that our students might need to prioritize something else during this time. So some, like I have an international student that's in South Korea. So she is not able to make our live classes, but she checks in, at a time that works for her, and she's able to do stuff later on. So just having lots of different, I don't know, just different opportunities for them to connect. I'm finding that kids will kind of come and go as they please. So I think one of those mentioned, you might have a different set of people during each class. And I'm definitely seeing that as well. So yeah, they know that we're here, and yeah, they'll kind of connect when they feel is appropriate for them.
Okay.
Isn't that cool that you've got a student, halfway around the world and is still checking in with you? Right? Like that, those are things that are, kind of some of the highlights. One of the question I had is, regardless of whether it's K-8 or high school, I think a lot of the commentary or directive, whatever you want to call it, from Provincial Department of Education was, while student marks or standings would move forward with them at the time where classes were discontinued, they would also be provided with the opportunity to improve their standing. And I guess that's getting more into the topic of assessment. So I'm going to pose this to the group that's with us. What does formative or summative assessment look like for you in this remote learning environment? Again, students are to be provided with opportunities to improve their standing. from what it was at the discontinuance of classes. So what does formative assessment look like in this remote learning environment?
Hi, everybody. It's Shelley. I'm here in Alberta, and I think assessment's a challenge, but what I've had some success with is just meeting students where they're at. So whatever is shared, if it's something for formative or summative assessment, just to share some criteria, not always formally in rubric style, but just, hey, like, try this when you're jumping. Remember these performance cues. See how many ways you can do it. Here's some ideas, and you go. And then the students that choose to respond, I spend more of my time engaging with them. And this was great. So cool that you came up with that. Have you tried this, this, and this? And then they can go and continue from there. So that's what it's looking like here.
Thanks, Shelley.
Thanks, Shelley. Shelley, do you have a lot of students engaged?
It's different. I'm in a K-9 school here in Calgary, and we use different platforms at different grade levels. So our district is a Google district, and Google Classroom, I found for our K-6 students has been quite successful, just because I find it pretty interactive. The platform we use for grade 7 to 9 is a bit different, and it's really good when you have face-to-face school, but a little bit more challenging when you're learning remotely. So I've got more elementary students engaging than I have junior high. So for us, that's grade 7 to 9 junior high. But with the older students, I've taken kind of a two-prong approach. So, you know, like Grant, like you mentioned, I think supervisor had said fun ways to supplement the school week. Like, I share stuff like that with everybody. And then I have a, if you're interested in improving your mark or digging a little deeper, here's some stuff with specific criteria and go for it. So I kind of have a choose your own adventure going in grade 7 to 9. And the engagement is not great.
Thanks, Shelley. I just posted a link in the chat. I hope everyone was able to see it. It's a document out of, it is a US education group. It's recommendations for grading during COVID-19 school closures. And I think there's lots to be taken from that one. So I just share that with you. I wish I had seen that at the beginning. It may have helped guide some of our practices here in Riel, but I think, regardless of the situation we're in now and moving forward, I think it's just, it's a well put together document. So I'm pretty sure it opened up in everyone's chat feature. So.
I'll toss something else out about evaluation overall or assessment. It's also inherent for all of us as teachers. Grading or assessment is just a really big part of what we do, and especially I guess just in education in general. As the school year ends, we've always been held kind of accountable as educators around the summative piece. Like, and this year, this context that we're working in now is just very, very different. So I'm going to toss this out there. I think there's a lot of guilt that teachers are feeling because if engagement isn't as good as we'd like it to be, because as physical educators, we really pride ourselves on having great engagement, right? That's a big part of our teaching and coaching, right? Like, we think, hey, we want our kids to be involved. We pride ourselves as a profession or within the profession that we've got great engagement. And then to be in the situation we are in now, and there's also very many variables now about why kids aren't engaging. It may not be us as educators. It may be their home situations or health situations. So there's lots of other variables out there. But I'm sensing as the year goes on, as we get close to the end of this school year, that there's some guilt around the engagement piece, and then the I guess the assessment part of where we are at. It's also hard to do assessment when you when you can't see someone or you can't be around them, and that's difficult, because before this happened, we wouldn't even think that we would try assessment in those situations, and now it's become sort of the norm, or not the norm, but I mean, it's definitely out there. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to address a couple of things in the chat and then come back to your comment, Reg. Kelly had asked if I could repost that. I think Ellen did that. So Kelly, if you can just give me, yeah, you got the link. I think that's what Ellen reposted. So just want to make sure you get that. Bridget also made a comment that it's not just phys ed where kids are not engaged or disengaging. And I think that's a really good comment is we can't take it personally, folks. Couple comments I'd just like to refer back to 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, when Dr. Amanda Stanek hosted the check-in. And I wrote her comment down is, none of us were trained or prepared to teach or learn in a global pandemic. So we're all trying to do the best we can in a situation that we really weren't prepared for, to be quite honest. We kind of got thrown into this upside down and backwards, and we're hoping we're kind of landing on our feet. And so we need to think about that. I'd also share some commentary that my assistant soups shared with myself and my coordinator colleagues is, you know, there's the potential for us to all receive to be criticized at this point for what we're doing or what we're not doing, etc. And her, you know, thoughts on that were we need to take criticism seriously, but not personally. You know, there's people are under so much pressure. Some that we can be familiar with, some that we can kind of forecast, but there's just lots of situations that we may not know about, and so people are, you know, reacting in ways that you know, we need to listen to, and again, you know, not take personal, because you know, it's just the way they are maybe perhaps dealing with things. So I'll leave it at that. And in terms of the assessment and whether it's formative or summative, you know, to build on what Rich says, I think, you know, now is the time more than ever where, you know, if students are submitting work, it's going to be more differentiated than ever. You know, when we have them face to face, it tends to be more of a kind of one size fits all. Here's an assignment, here's the success criteria. That may be something for us to think about moving forward is, you know, there's probably a number of different ways that students are, if they are demonstrating their learning, that we may need to take into consideration moving forward.
I'll toss something else out about maybe alleviating some of the guilt. But say let's take a grade 8 physical education class where you're working on a fundamental movement skill or a strategy, and you do the teaching part, and lots of kids in your class may not give you automatic responses back, even when they're in the gymnasium or the setting that you're using. So even in a normal environment, we sometimes don't get that feedback from the kids that we would like. So it would be like me. I get lots of emails, and lots of times, have you ever answered an email in your head and then thought that you actually did it? And then you wake up in the middle of the night thinking, oh my goodness, I didn't respond. I didn't send that, you know, I didn't actually do the email. Well, I think kids are like that too. Sometimes right now we're broadcasting our content or what we're hoping for, and then just because kids don't get back to us doesn't necessarily mean that because we're taking that as engagement, right? So if I don't do anything in physical education but I respond to my teacher, that looks like engagement. But maybe I think I'm just being hopeful. I think there are kids out there that are getting the message of what we're trying to do, and they're actually doing it. They're just not getting back to us about, you know, or which is normal, right? Because grade 8 kids wouldn't always do that, right, in that situation. So I do see this though, and I'll applaud everyone for this. I see our kids in this country playing with their parents, and I think that's huge. I love that. I think coming out of this pandemic, that's going to be one of the greatest things that our profession has done, is that I see children, young and old, within the school environment playing with their parents. Maybe because they have to, but I see some really good things there. And I think in in a physically literate journey for all of us, that may be a variable for these children down the road. Because ultimately, if they play with their parents, hopefully they're going to play with their kids when they become parents. And we'll all talk about the time when the pandemic hit and how much fun that was to play with mom and dad. So, so I'm really hopeful that way. And I know that's not really assessment, but I think that's an awesome one, right? If you're playing with your mom and dad during this break, that's a good thing.
Well, it certainly speaks to what would be probably our global, vision of physical education across the country, and that's to lead physically active and healthy lifestyles, right? And hopefully with those closest to us. So yeah, I think there's some things to take away from that. Just have a question from Charmaine is, when elementary students don't engage, how hard should we push to get responses from our students? Is it putting pressure on parents who are already overwhelmed? I think that's a contextual thing. That's what I've been hearing in our schools. Some are, administrators are hearing from families that it's like they've just got too much on their plate, and with the best of intentions. So again, they may be trying the activities or, experimenting, whatever term you want to use. They may not be getting back to us. But, if they've got multiple, school-age children at home, and mom and dad could be having to working from home, and they've got limited, there's just a finite amount of time and opportunity. So I think that's a school conversation. And if we're not asking parents the direct question of, how is it going? Do you need more? Do you need less? Like, if we're not asking that explicitly, I think we're missing the boat, because I think every household is different, and teachers are going to need to, especially though in that literacy numeracy, and I've heard that comment in our division is, they're overwhelmed with all these other opportunities, but it's a collective amount of information that's going out. So it's not one teacher in particular. I think it's the collective, and we need to be sensitive to that. Going back, Rich, to your comment around the rate at which people respond, if they respond, we typically assume that particularly young people, teenagers, they have a third appendage, and that's their cell phone, and they're always on it. That's not the case. They are selective, I think, what my experience has been. And in talking to one of our teachers who actually teaches an online course prior to COVID, he says that's the difference, is that the rate at which you get responses from students is, much different. And, when you're in a face-to-face class, when you can ask a question and get a general sense of, are students understanding, or do they get the concept, etc. In an online environment, it's a one-on-one, reaction, and it just takes a lot longer to get that.
Good point.
Ellen or Helene from Charbonneau from Quebec, concerned that phys ed is gradually replaced by online calisthenics. Kids want to play, and in Montreal, the playgrounds are closed off. Phys ed is so much more than doing jumping jacks online. On the other hand, I see many kids no longer having training wheels on their bikes. Yeah. I think that's been an ongoing discussion across different platforms. Is it really online physical education, or is it just physical activity and exercise? And that seems to be maybe a bit of a great debate right now. I think the activities that we are trying to provide are contributing to their overall well-being. And I really think that from what I'm hearing from our staff, is that students are missing each other, and they are missing their teachers, even though they may not express it. And I think that there will be a desire for them to be coming back in a face-to-face environment where we can, continue to put the E back in education, as Ross Campbell wrote about in his blog on PHE Canada.
I also know too, it has shown up in the chat as well this morning that physical educators are worried about they're worried about our subject area in terms of, you know, as we move forward now into next school year or into the future, you know, is there going to be a push from maybe senior leadership or ministries of education to do more physical education online, or what's that going to look like, and so on. So I think that also is a fear, not just in physical education. I think that's out there for all subject areas. I think teachers are feeling that quite a bit. But I guess we can't kid ourselves that governments are looking at, you know, what's the cost factor to different approaches to education. There's lots of variables out there that are well beyond us as educators. But I will toss this out though. Again, I'm going to use the word hopeful, but I really think that moving forward, when it's going to be when our students come back to school, not if, but when our students come back to school, I think that's going to be our moment to shine as physical educators, because that's where formative assessment, which we are so good at, is going to come into play. We're going to get our kids back into the gymnasium or schools or whatever environment we're teaching in, and this is an opportunity for us to prepare to figure out where our kids are going to be at when they come back, and then we're going to create a teaching and learning environment where they can thrive. And because the big piece about what we do as physical educators is the human piece. It's that personal connection that we have. It's the affective domain. Physical educators, that we are really good at that, and we're going to make a difference. And part of the reason why we will is because when kids are happy and healthy, they're going to do well in their other subject areas. And we're really good at doing that and providing that. So maybe we don't get the airtime sometimes as making a really big difference in schools, but I think when our children come back to school, we're going to be the frontline people that are going to make a difference for all subject areas, because we're going to be able to provide learning environments for them to thrive. And I really think physical education and health is the environment for that. So I'm really hopeful they are going to come back, and maybe we need to use this time right now to make sure that we're ready when that does happen.
Couldn't agree more, Reg. And you know, while we want to, you know, for lack of a better term, preserve physical education, we also have to know the role that physical education has and how we can contribute to students' overall success in other areas of school. In terms of, you know, we know the physiology, if we, you know, refer to Dr. Rady's book, Spark, and how exercise and physical activity, the education piece, contributes to the academic learning in other areas of the school, as well as the other arts contribute to the overall development of the whole child. You know, you talked about, you know, support for PHE, and I didn't pre-ask this, but we have Laurie Sigurdson, current president of PHE Canada, joining us. We have Melanie Davis, our executive director, and so maybe I'd invite either Melanie or Laurie just to speak about the current campaign that was launched this week about #WeSupportPHE.
I can jump in, Laurie, and then maybe if you want to add thoughts after I'm done, that would be great. So I think this is such an interesting discussion because it's you know, I was paying attention to this, but also responding to an educator who was super concerned about PHE and where it's standing just in the home learning environment that we're in now, but also come September. And so they were emailing saying, I don't know who to advocate to. And what help can I be in what PHE Canada is doing. So we have a We Support PHE hashtag campaign that's going on right now. The idea of that is so that we can get beyond the echo chamber of who are the usual suspects. So what you would do is you would have the picture, make a comment on social media, but tag somebody who is a decision maker or outside of our usual community so that we can spread the word, because I know that we are all committed and that we all believe, but it's about getting that information into the hands of those decision makers. So we can put a link into that, but many of you have already seen it, but we're just, it's taking off. It's doing really, really well. So everything you can do, or anything you can do, would be greatly appreciated. The second piece that I'll talk about is our efforts to create national guidelines for PHE moving forward. So we know that September is going to look different. And so what we're trying to do is create a set of guidelines that can convince those decision makers that PHE can be done and why it should be done. And so we want to get that out really quickly so that it's in the hands of those decision makers as they start planning for September. So on May 29th, there'll be another cross-country check-in where we will have our excellent first draft, and then we'll be looking to educators like yourselves to weigh in and share your ideas so that it can be as doable as possible. So those are the two pieces, and then I'll just check in with Lori there to see if you want to add something.
And just to add to that, one of the things that I've been working on here provincially and regionally is something similar for both our leadership team at my board level, but also at the provincial level, to really push forward how essential PE and health education is going to be, regardless of what our return to school looks like, that they are still essential subjects that directly impact student health and well-being. And so there is no other subject area that does that. There is no other subject areas that have the sole purpose of helping develop resilient, healthy students. And so having language that really emphasizes those kind of key messages is really important. And just to encourage you to participate in the campaign, to reach out to decision makers in your school communities and in your community, and do an advocacy campaign around why we are essential and what it can look like for us, because we are adaptable, we are resilient, and we can teach anywhere. And so I think that's really, really important going forward. So I encourage you to get involved and engage with the campaigns.
Thanks, Lori, and thanks, Melanie. Just to add to a couple things, your comment, Lori, about we can teach anywhere, I think that's going to become more important than ever, of when we come back, because we're not sure what the guidelines will be, social distancing. I certainly think that we are going to have to take way more advantage of outdoor type activities, alternative pursuits, simply because we have more space available to us. So that may stretch some of our thinking who have, to be quite honest, quite comfortable teaching in a 4x4 walled formal gymnasium. So, and yet we know the benefits that nature can bring, not only to us as movers, but thinkers too, and outdoor classrooms, and how can we start to take advantage of some of those things moving forward. In the chat, there was also a couple of links provided by Faye and Ryan from the staff. So Ryan had posted the link to the Home Learning Center, and I had made a note of that. So Ryan, thanks for posting that. So for any of you that have not yet visited the Home Learning Center that PHE Canada's put together, I highly recommend it. The staff at PHE Canada have been working, dedicatedly and extremely hard in putting really great resources together for you. They've identified what I like is learning outcomes. They're broad learning outcomes that I think any one of us, regardless of where we are in the country, can make the connection to our own provincial curriculum. So hats off to the staff for that. Lori, you mentioned a couple times, being resilient, and as we come back, and we're going to start to maybe shift our conversation to, what assessment could look like in the fall or when we get back with our students. But that whole idea of resilience, and there's just a great resource through PHE Canada on Teach Resiliency, and that overall well-being and mental health picture of, students. But I would say of those of us and our colleagues in the physical education and in the teaching profession, we continue to talk about, as we should, because our primary responsibility is to our students. But I think we also have a responsibility to take care of ourselves and our colleagues, particularly with our mental health. I can only imagine, the situations that many of you are going in. I've talked to a number of our staff that, both people are teachers in our division, and they have students, or they have children in our system, and they said, like, it's overwhelming, and we're teachers. Can't imagine how, families are managing at this time when, whatever their home situation is, trying to, keep their kids engaged. So hats off to everything that you're doing, and hats off to all the work that the families are doing, because it's a tough situation. It's a tough grind, folks.
I also think too, Grant, that this can be a time where, and I talked a little bit earlier because it was coming through in the chat about, people feeling a little anxious, maybe a little guilty about the way things are going, and so on. I really think we have to use this time as educators I'll go back to Stephen Covey's work. We need to sharpen the saw. This is the time for us to, we can't apologize for taking some time and preparing for something we're not sure about, but we need to prepare, right? We need to spend some time on making sure that we're okay, that we can use this time for our own personal professional development, and we can start getting ready for whatever's going to come our way, even towards the end of this school year, but even more so going into next school year. So I really think that's that we have to do that in order to, first of all, look after ourselves, because if we don't, we're not good to our families or our colleagues or our school, right? Our students. So that sharpening the saw is a big one. So I'll use this. I think about this one often. There's a Rocky movie, Rocky Balboa, and I think it's number 3, where he's taken on Drago, and he ends up traveling to Russia. He has to do training in Russia, and they put Rocky out with his trainer out into a farm, right back to grassroots, where he has to start over, and he has to look around this farmyard and find logs and use training equipment in order to get ready. And his response was that no matter what they threw at him in terms of what disadvantages they gave him, he was going to find a way to make sure that he was prepared and ready for whatever was coming. And I'm not going to say that the Rocky Balboa and physical educators are the same, but I'm going to say they are, because we've got some of the same traits where we're going to be resilient as a group. We can really make a difference in the fall. We might not get the headlines and the accolades sometimes, but I think deep down we know that we're the glue within the schools that can make a difference in all subject areas. And I think we need to say that and celebrate that. But let's use this time now when if we're worried about engagement with our kids and so on, we can all come out of this better, and then we can be really prepared in the fall when whatever hits us. And I really believe that we'll make a difference for our kids and our communities. We already have made a difference in our communities so far with the number of children that are playing with their parents. So let's keep on that path.
I'm just chuckling. I got to give a shout out to Sal with his, he was quick to the draw. I don't know if you guys have worked that out, but he had the picture of Rocky ready to go. So we've been knocked down a number of times, and we keep getting back up off the mat. And it just goes back to the commentary that Melanie and Lori were engaged in this whole campaign about we support PHE. We need to do that in our local context, but again, through the leadership of PHE Canada, we continue to support each other coast to coast to coast. And for those of you that don't know, PG Canada, in collaboration with the Council of Provinces and Territories, which are the presidents of your respective provincial associations, there was a advocacy letter sent to all ministers of education across the country to continue, or if not already acknowledging the contributions that physical education and health can make to our students, is for them to consider doing so as they move forward. And Melanie, did the office ever hear anything back from any of that went out?
Yeah, we did from some provinces, but not all. But with our work doesn't end just with those letters, though. With the national guidelines that are going to come out, looking forward to September or even summer, those again will go out to those ministers and those decision makers. So, we're always looking for opportunities to keep up this dialogue with those ministers, because I think they need to learn or know why this is really important. And as I said before, they need to know how it can be done. Those two pieces. I actually have my hand up because I wanted to say one other thing that's unrelated, and if I can jump in. It was Bradley's comment there about getting parents on board. And it made me think about the role of the whole school community. And linking back to what Reg was saying about doing things differently, and sharpening the saw, and looking at who is in our school community that we can leverage to support students' learning. And so, the parents, the students themselves, the community parks, the community resources that are in our communities. And so I just thought that I'd just share my reaction to what Bradley was saying there, and the link between his comment and whole school communities.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. And I'm seeing Laura Patterson, who is from Ontario, and the board rep, is that their organization, OASFI, did hear back from the minister in Ontario. They had a phone call with him, and he appeared receptive to including physical and his wellness agenda moving forward. So that's great news. So again, thank you to PG Canada for the leadership there. I'm going to share with you a conversation I believe I had with Reg recently, and Melanie as well. Back in '94, and not to turn the clock back too far, but in '94, Manitoba went through a potential reduction in physical education, where the minister recommended making physical education and health education optional after grade 8. There was an unbelievable groundswell of support for phys ed, and not just from the phys ed community. It was a well-constructed, thought-out advocacy campaign, which CAFERD at the time, now PG Canada, was involved with, and other stakeholders. Because sometimes, it seems a self-serving when it's only phys ed. At the time then, when we had a provincial conference, we had the keynote speaker who had a marketing background, and they said, one of the things you need to think about in physical education, and I share this with this group now as we continue to move forward, and some of you are somewhat concerned about the future of phys ed in your own jurisdictions. The keynote at that time had a slide and it had 4 lines. 3 of them were the same. It was do a good job, do a good job, do a good job, tell somebody. And I think we've worked awfully hard over our careers in physical and health education, yet nobody knows what we really do. And I think we need to be less humble, for lack of a better term, and share. And the best avenue to share is through the eyes and ears and the narrative from our students, and allowing them to share their experiences. One example of that I'm familiar with, and it works better probably in a K-6, K-8 environment, is student-led conferences in phys ed, where the students themselves are demonstrating the learning to their parents. It's coming from their perspective and sharing what physical education is like. So I just share that, and it ties in with the assessment, because then the students are actually demonstrating their learning in physical education and sharing that with, their parents or their caregivers, so that they're walking away with a better understanding of what our programs are like. We need to think of ways that we can invite parents in. Reg and I have been, supporters of PHE Canada, CAFER before that, and the QDPE campaign. We have lots of stories and very fond ones to share with that. One of the things I would encourage, if you and your school have not ever or not recently applied for recognition through the QDPE campaign, because it seems for many as a difficult recognition to apply for on behalf of yourself. And what I would say to you is that it's not just about you, it's about what your program offers to the entire school. It recognizes the contributions of your colleagues that help you with, your intramurals and when I look at quality phys ed, it's a three-pronged approach. It's your instructional program, it's your intramural program, it's your interscholastic program, and there's lots of people in every building that contribute to that. I see it, the QDP, as a ways and means to do a bit of an assessment yourself based on the application, but it's also an advocacy tool, and to share the good news and the good things that you're done. So that's my personal wish, is for you to consider doing that moving forward. It's a bit of a self-reflection tool, but it's also an advocacy tool that can help support as we talk about this campaign. I didn't talk to you about that, Reg, but I know you're passionate about that as well. So I'd welcome any thoughts or comments from you on that one.
Well, I think, yeah, no matter what the environment, we just have to keep our heads up, and we're on the right track. And I think another thing too that ties into the assessment, because assessment sometimes is whether it's formative or summative, there's a bit of a finality to assessment in physical education, and I'm going to flip that around a little bit, because I think ultimately what we want is, and I may be saying this because I'm at the end of my career, but I've had the privilege of watching lots of my students that I had over the years that are still physically active now. So they're in their 30s and 40s, and they're playing with their kids. And I look at that as an evaluative piece that I think ultimately that's where we want to be down the road. So when it comes to assessment, I'm all about the assessment for learning, but that learning doesn't just stop at the end of grade 12. That physically active learner through a life course is ultimately what we should be trying to achieve. And in this current environment, if we can plant a seed, maybe our kids aren't as active as we'd like them to be right now, but if we plant that seed about that they remember the time that they got to play outside and have that extra opportunity, if that lends itself to them being active 15 years from now or when they have their own children, I think that would be incredibly successful in terms of what we're trying to achieve. So I know sometimes we feel we're not making as much progress as we would like, but ultimately I really think we are making a difference. And ultimately right now, this situation is an issue of health for all of us, and we're at the forefront of making a difference with children. So I applaud all of you for that effort.
Absolutely agree with you, Reg. What I'd like to just take a couple minutes, and I know we've talked about, and some people have shared, let's just take a couple minutes. And does anybody have any questions around assessment that maybe we haven't addressed or other people haven't talked about yet, that, we may not get to them specific, but certainly share those questions or concerns within the chat feature, because we will be going back over those after, and we'll try to, as best we can, provide some sort of, I guess, commentary or answers. I think would be our goal on that one, because we certainly don't want you, clicking off this call and feeling that you didn't have any questions at least heard, or had the opportunity to share with you or share with us what your questions and concerns were. So again, invite you to do that. And as you think about that, one of the, I guess, thinkings that Reg and I had was we also wanted to think about kind of the moving forward piece. And Melanie talked about the work and the guidelines that PG Canada will be proposing. Reg and I had a really good conversation the other day about particularly around assessment and what our focus, in the minds of Reg and I needs to be as we come back, whenever that is. So Reg, if you maybe just want to kind of share your thoughts on that, and then we can have people weigh in on that thought.
Well, I think this is just, I'm trying to look into the future, but I really think this is what it would look like when our students finally come back to us. We're going to have, our students are going to come back to us from all different vantage points. There is going to be some, I'm not going to call it repercussions, but what's happening to all of our families and kids right now is going to have an impact when they come back to school. So at that point, when they do, the assessment that we use at that time is going to have to be formative. We're going to need to find out where our students are at. We're going to have to know our curriculum really well, because we're going to have to know where they're at. And then we're going to have to respond. And we respond by using that information that we gather initially, basically getting to re-know our students again, and at all levels, and then directing our planning and instruction to meet the needs of our kids. And that's going to be huge. And the other part that we have to do then is we also have to do that in a non-judgmental way. Because when our students come back, we have to welcome them with open arms, no matter where they're at. And we can't be saying, well, because we're going to have some kids coming back that have been spending a lot of time making sure that their fundamental movement skills are up to par. And we're going to have some other kids that their fitness levels are going to be great, and other kids, it'll be incredibly low. But what we have to do then is we have to create a learning environment that's going to be successful for all of those kids to grow. We can't be using things like, well, we need to catch you up, or you need to, we can't go to that. We have to know that, and we have to create environments where every child can be successful and to grow. And ultimately, we all believe, as educators, our kids will be fine. We'll get them where they need to be. We're professionals, and we can do that. But we need to know what to teach, and it may not look exactly like what we used to do in terms of how we would respond to what our curriculums expect us to teach. So I think that is huge. And then going back to this as well too, one of the article that Grant presented is the biggest thing that it talked about in terms of where we want our children to be right now is that they still need to understand that physical activity and movement is fun. It's that affective domain piece. So when our kids come back, we really have to accentuate that, celebrate that, and make sure that that's inherent as we move forward, and then try to fill the gaps in. But we fill the gaps in for our students when we're really, really good at things. Understanding our curriculum and the intents of what we need to teach, but also understanding where our students are so that we can adjust our planning to do that. If you look at understanding by design, Wiggins and Matai, their whole focus is around, you have to start with the end in mind. So what do we want to achieve when our kids come back? But in order to do that, in order to know what to teach, we have to know where the gaps are. We have to know what the kids are good at and what they're not, and we have to really accentuate around that then to direct our planning and instruction to meet their needs. It can't be, our kids aren't going to come back at the same point. That's unrealistic. But they shouldn't feel guilty about where they're at on the pendulum or the continuum. We have to make a difference that way, and I really think we will.
Yeah, I'd agree, Reg, and hopefully, optimistically, that we are back in some way, shape, or form in this, and teaching face to face in September. That has to be a time where lots of observation, formative assessment from us as teachers to understand exactly what you're saying, Reg, is where are they at and what do they need to move forward. But it's not just about the fundamental movement skills. We need to make sure that, I think more so than ever, that we're tending to the social and emotional piece, because we have been in this isolated scenario for such a long time. And there will be that sense of belonging For those of you who are familiar with, Circle of Courage work, that people will want that support from their friends and from their teachers, and we'll just have to figure out what that support and sense of belonging will look like in what I would think is going to be some sort of hybrid scenario moving forward. So it's that sense of understanding where maybe they need to be, but more so importantly where they're coming from, and being reactive to those situations, and taking care of the social emotional needs as much as the physical needs.
Well said.
So we are just at 12:03. There's been some great suggestions and commentary in the chat room. I think Reg and I have some time. I know people probably had kind of the hour blocked off for them, but we can certainly stay on and answer any questions if people want to open their mics up. Again, thanks to the leadership of PHE Canada for hosting these cross Canada check-ins. I think they're really appreciated for many of the folks that I've talked to, just to be able to hear and see what is happening with our colleagues locally and across the country. And I think it's just the great leadership. So again, thanks to Melanie and the staff at the office, and to Lori and to the board of directors, the council of provinces and the research council, and all the folks that make the big wheel of PG Canada move forward in the positive direction that we are.
I will second all of those comments. So thanks, Grant.
And a poll has just come up. So if you just take a few seconds just to click off. Are you a member of PHE Canada? And are you a member of your provincial association? Again, I'd like to thank my partner, Reg. It's always a pleasure working with you, pal, and to thank everyone for taking the time out of your day to join us on this check-in from wherever you are joining us from. We hope that you're able to take away at least one nugget. Is always my goal when involved in something like this, is something for you to think about, work towards, whether it's now or as we come back into our scenario in the fall. And as much as we want to continue to think about how we can keep our students safe and well, I also want you to think about what practices do you have in place to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and those closest to you, because those are really important facets as well. And sometimes as teachers, we sometimes neglect taking care of ourselves. So please make sure that you're taking care of yourself, folks.
Thank you, everyone, and stay well, and really enjoy the long weekend.
Absolutely. Yeah.